Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Chris with Traffic Custom Shop, and I've been sitting here fitting these Spyderco Smock scales made from G-Carta, and I figured I'd make a little tutorial video on how to disassemble your Smock knife carefully and replace the stock scales with the Traffic Custom Shop G-Carta. So yeah, hope you guys enjoy the video, and please comment below if you guys have any questions. But I will do my best to explain how to do this. All right, thanks. Basically what you're gonna need is a T8 hex bit and a T6 hex bit to get off the screws for the pocket clip, the barrel screws here, barrel spacer screws here, and the pivot screw. So we're gonna start off with our T6 bit, and we are going to remove the pocket clip. And we'll just get this out of the way. It makes it much easier to replace the scales once this is off, because you have essentially a flat surface to kind of pin everything down as you're removing it. So the Smock kind of has this tricky little second detent ball that sits on top of the world's tiniest spring. So it's really important that we make sure that that spring and detent ball doesn't pop out. But basically what you want to do is you're going to keep this side up, because that's the side, the detent ball is essentially on the other side of the blade. So it'll be kind of still trapped in there once you start kind of pulling this thing apart. So let's take the barrel spacer screws out next. And we're going to do that on both sides, just because it makes things easier once you get to the other side. And don't be like me and just throw screws around. Try to keep them safe. I've already lost screws and, had to buy the replacements, so learn from my mistakes. Here is the other two barrel spacer screws, and we're going to flip this thing back over. I'm going to just keep that pivot screw in there just to keep things kind of somewhat still together. So now we're going to take the pivot screw out here. And this scale will be free essentially, so you're going to see that kind of pop up. I don't know if you guys kind of heard that, but the thing kind of lifted up because it's somewhat spring-loaded with that little detent ball. So removing the scales can be kind of tricky because they're such a tight fit to the liner. So what I do is I take a little razor blade to kind of carefully separate the scales. So I kind of ease it in, not cutting, you don't want to cut your scales, and you just kind of slip it under and then give it a shimmy off. And now it's really important that you don't separate everything. And honestly, if you can, just turn the scales on their side and open them up a little bit and see if that detent ball falls out. And we got the lock bar pin here fell out, so we'll keep that safe and kind of just do it again. And now see it kind of popped fully open. So it looks like the detent ball is actually sitting on the lock bar itself. So I'm just going to kind of hit it out, and there it is, teeny little guy. So if you have a magnetic tray, this is where it will come in handy, because it is magnetic. So just kind of put it in there. And don't forget you have the spring in there still. So that spring is on the other side of the liner. So we're just going to keep it in there for now. And I'm going to try to remove these scales from the liner. Sometimes the whole liner will just come up, and that'll be easier. Whatever works for you to get the things off. So you can see the barrel spacer here kind of stuck in one side, and now the scale is pretty much free to come out. There's still one little indexing pin there that sits in it, but we got the liner off. We'll stick that there. I'm just going to keep the indexing pin there, put the old scales to the side, take the blade out, and there you have your washer bearings, your pivot screw pin, taking the barrel spacer out again. Here's the lanyard spacer. And now these scales are pretty much free. And now we can see that teeny little spring. Don't lose it. So basically I just hover it above the magnetic tray and pops right out. There you go. Just keep them in there. They're very small. And they have minds of their own, it seems like. So now we pretty much have the whole thing apart. So I kind of keep all my pieces on a paper towel here just so you can see everything easily and keep everything kind of organized. So we have the Make and Bacon G-Carta here that we are going to install on this Smock. Now, just talk about these scales a little bit. Basically, I kind of stabilize them with ultra thin CA glue, and then I remove all the CA glue so it kind of reveals the natural G-Carta kind of fabric texture. I really like the textile feel, kind of having a little more texture instead of just, you know, solid sheet. Yeah, you might get a better gloss, a better sheen if you do a layer of the CA glue and buff that back, but I kind of like that. And honestly, over time, as you use your scales, these will start buffing out just naturally, just from, you know, you're using it with your hand and, you know, things of that nature. But they are stabilized with CA glue, so they are very, very sturdy. Those guys at J.L. Hansen and Sons, they make amazing material, really creative design patterns and color usage. So I'm really stoked on everything that I get from them. So again, you know, thanks Greg and everybody else over there at J.L. Hansen and Sons. Yeah, good stuff. So what I like to do is I start with the liner that has the keyed holes for the barrel spacers. So I'll take that liner here, that's not the right scale, and find the one that has the pocket for the lock bar, this little recess for the detent and the lock bar. So we're going to put these down, kind of like that, scale side down, and have it kind of float in there. And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put the lanyard spacer back in there. Whew, yeah, it's chilly. So that sticks right in there, and you just want to make sure that it's kind of nice and flush. If it's not flush, it'll kind of be popping out a little bit like that, but you want to just make sure it gets tight in there. So there's that, and then we are going to take the barrel spacer and find the keyed side and put the keyed side down. Find the key in the hole. It's not going. All right, there it is. Locked it in. Find the other one, keyed side down. Lock it in. And that kind of gives you, you know, a decent indexing on the scale. And now I'm going to put on the washer bearing, and then back to putting the world's, oh, I just dropped it. Okay. Be super careful with this thing because, man, it really does have a mind of its own. It will fly off in a moment's notice. So what you want to do is just very carefully try to get that in there. And it's in. Okay. Whew. Yeah, that's the scariest part about this. But once it's in there, it's in there. You can see as my pivot screw pin falls out, it's going to be locked in. So just don't flip it over or anything once you're to this point. And then next thing, here's the little trick. Your pocket clip, it acts as a crutch for your blade when you have the blade on. So now I'm going to put the little detent ball in the pin very carefully, drop it on there, and I'm going to try to show you guys without it falling what that looks like. So it's just kind of sitting on there, and we are going to carefully drop that on. Pivot screw came out, so I'm going to put that back in there, and then now goes the blade. So here's the part where you got to be careful, and this is where you don't want to be really fumbling around with this thing. Just kind of rest it on there and kind of secure it and look under and confirm that the detent ball is still sitting on top of that spring. And if it is, you can let go of it now, and the pocket clip is going to hold the blade so it doesn't, you know, teeter-totter there on the pivot screw, releasing the detent ball. So that's the trick. And then you're going to finish off with putting the other washer bearing in there. And now we are ready to put the other liner on. So here's another kind of good tip for this. I always start with the lanyard hole. For whatever reason, starting with the lanyard hole just makes these things go a little easier. I think because of how the lock bar spring here kind of has some more flex than any other of these indexing components, you know, the lanyard spacer and the barrel spacers. It kind of just goes on the easiest. So I just kind of stick that on there and it goes on perfect pretty much every time. The liner locked in here, we're going to put the stop pin in, and that thing is indexed as well, so go ahead and just line that up and that will drop in. And be a little proud, but there is a recess on the inside of the scale to compensate for that. So now we got everything kind of locked in, got the stop pin securely in the liner. And we are going to start with the lanyard spacer again, go over the barrel spacers and over the pivot screw. So now that looks great. I'm going to kind of pinch it at the pivot screw and put the pivot screw pin, you know, and put the screw on and thread that in there. Make sure it's going in true. And I just do it kind of till it snugs up. But there we go, it's in, and now we are going to put the barrel spacer screws in, and I'm kind of just going to skip through this because it's pretty straightforward. Now we're just locked everything in, and we're going to take a look, and you can see the blade is pretty close, but it's a little loose still, so we are going to go ahead and fine tune this bad boy. Not quite there yet, so we're going to back it out a little bit. There we go. Yep, and there you have it. Bacon G-Carta. Making bacon on a Spyderco Smock knife. Man, does that look cool. Got great action. Keep in mind this knife is dry. I didn't oil it, so I would recommend that you guys oil it, clean it and oil your knife in between that process. So, yep, loving it. Thanks again to Spyderco, Smock Knives, GL Hansen and Sons for making the material. Really appreciate all you guys' work and allowing me to kind of find a cool fun thing I can do with your guys' products. So yeah, go ahead and visit me online. Trifectcustom.shop is the URL, and you can follow me on Instagram at Facebook at Trifect Custom Shop. So there's my plug, and I hope you guys have a great week. Thank you. Bye.